What's funny is at one point in my life, I didn't used to think video games were all that, until one day my granddad bought me a PS1 demo disc which led to Final Fantasy VII, and me wanting to build a career in gaming ever since that day in some shape or form. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a very nostalgic game for me, and I think that 25 years later, it is very beautiful to still be here to celebrate Final Fantasy VII's 25th anniversary. This year is looking to be one of the strongest financial years for Square Enix in a couple years actually, with Kingdom Hearts 20th anniversary, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Strangers of Paradise, and many more. Last year was Neo 2E and Nier Replicant version 1.22474487139. Yeah, I'm annoying. I pissed my friends off saying the full title too. Y'all not safe. To where smaller titles in quotations got time to shine. If you know what I mean by that. 2022 is looking to take Square Enix, besides NFTs, to some of the most interesting highs possible this year if everything is executed right. I also haven't talked about another dope game called Project Triangle Strategy and other spin-offs Square Enix has as well. However, very recently we got a whole bunch of news about the future of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake from both Tetsuya Nomura and Yoshinori Kitase. And as I quote from Mr. Kitase, continuing on from the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier has also now opened for service, and next we have Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis waiting in the wings too. With all of these exciting new projects, I get a real sense of how more and more are supporting Final Fantasy VII. Not just the fans from the original game, but also those who've never experienced it and are being drawn to the unique world of Final Fantasy VII. So to me, this low-key fired in my ears because it proves to me Square Enix is aware and they understand that they have to strike a balance with Final Fantasy VII content that they are continuing to release, appealing to fans who've played the original but keeping the experience fresh and streamlined for players who've never touched it ever. It's already really good that at this point you could get Final Fantasy VII on almost every platform too. I've played a couple of games of Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier, which I wish they also released on console. I never went through the hassle to set it up via emulation, so I'm like, hey, it's whatever. And I think Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is a beautiful way to keep the integrity of the original Final Fantasy VII compilation games as well, with the modern twist to it, at least until I play it. The part that got me super excited was when Nomura came out and said this. And there will be even more news and Final Fantasy VII projects that started up after the remake coming in the future too. And the team sees this 25th anniversary as a waypoint on our journey of Final Fantasy VII. We will continue pressing ahead to even greater things, so please keep supporting us going forward. Now the reason why I'm super excited about this is because I remember growing up with a doujin and everything related to the Final Fantasy VII compilation. I think Square Enix is trying to modernize or recreate a new version of it again with everything Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Alright, I'm gonna stop lying to y'all. I just want another Having Children like movie. The story is laugh or whatever's in the OG one that we got back in like mid 2000s or whatever. But I ain't gonna lie to y'all, those fight scenes in that movie are still too eye candy for me to care. Also, I just want them to put Having Children all in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 as DLC. I'll pay for it, Square. Just take my damn money. But what even crazy right now is that Mr. Kitase stated after the recent Final Fantasy VII Remake First Soldier broadcast that he low-key wants to show more news on Final Fantasy VII Part 2. Kitase says that I think I'll be able to share some more news this year. Maybe. One, you gotta take that with a grain of salt that news may or may not come out this year the way I've read it, but they also just don't want to give away the element of surprise when they do. I personally believe Square Enix has realized they've had an issue of announcing video games way too early ever since Final Fantasy 15, or if anything with pre-Final Fantasy VII Remake. Even announcing or confirming anything in a pandemic with such fluctuating conditions and weird working environments right now can do more harm than good for them and their game's development. A lot of other factors can just throw everything off. So what should you expect from Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 in 2022? I personally believe Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 will get a key visual or trailer this summer. I think if even more plausible to say the latest place could just be the Game Awards 2022 again, just like they dropped 7 Remake on PC there as well. I also don't think we're having E3 this year, so that could be a hit or miss for trying to speculate anything around that time. I think the biggest thing we going to possibly get for 7 Remake Part 2 is finally showing off some Nanaki gameplay. I think that's the big thing I just want to see. You ain't got to show a lot. Give me like 40 seconds, bro. I could be good. But I really think the big elephant in the room with Square Enix right now is where is Final Fantasy 16 this year and what's happening with the game also. At one point, it seemed like they were ahead of development, had everything pretty much nailed to the T. And then COVID possibly changed that. But for real, I don't even really stress it. Let Square Enix take their time, man. They only revealed the Final Fantasy 16 trailer a whole year ago. I think I'll be more concerned if we got to the end of 2022 and then we still haven't seen anything of Final Fantasy 16. Like, come on, chill out, don't be stupid. That being said, that's my thoughts on all of Final Fantasy 25th anniversary and potentially new news on Final Fantasy VII Remake coming into 2022. Probably more information on part 2 as well. If you guys enjoyed today's video and my return to Final Fantasy content, just RPGs in general, hit the like button, subscribe, and thank you for supporting. And also follow me on Twitter at avataryayaTV_. So remember, you guys are golden and that is raw. And also remember, have yourself a damn good one. I'm out and peace.
I've been the devil, I need me an arc and no one am I breathing, I feel like time's roll. Walking this bitch with a sound pop, while she rock it, I keep me a domino. Bitch on my dick, man, I feel like Kazaki. Stretching that pussy out like it's Pilates. I'm snatching the soul like right out of a body. Fire, I spitting, I feel like Dobby. White bitch, blonde hair, looking like Lucy. She from Kyoshi, I paint her face Suki.